a moment longer, give everyone a chance to connect. And all right, I see most folks have, so we'll go ahead and get started. So hi again, everyone. Welcome to PMP Live. My name is Michelle, and I'm a bookseller with the Children and Teens Department. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are so excited to have Suzanne Slade with us to celebrate her most recent book, Mars Is, Stark Slopes, Silvery Snow, and Startling Surprises. And also joining us tonight is Ari Espinoza, the HiRise Outreach Coordinator. We'll drop the link for purchasing Mars Is into the chat box. So if you don't already own a copy, you can reserve yours today. We are happy to include signed book plates from the author while supplies last. You can also check out our website for Suzanne's other amazing books. Tonight, you can ask the guests questions by clicking Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. You can also vote on your favorite questions, and at the end, we'll have time to go over some together. As always, please remember this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that folks be respectful of one another and any questions and comments. Now on to tonight's event. It is my pleasure to introduce award-winning author Suzanne Slade. Suzanne has written over 100 children's books. Her works often highlight STEM women, her hometown heroes of Chicago, and space exploration. Her books include Countdown and A Computer Called Catherine, both of which received starred reviews and made the NSTA Best STEM Books list. Exquisite, her picture book biography on poet Gwendolyn Brooks, became a Robert F. Seibert Honor Book and Coretta Scott King Honor Book. Before Suzanne began her writing career, she worked at McDonnell Douglas Space Systems on Delta rockets, Titan rockets, and the Delta Star spacecraft. Her latest work, Mars Is, pairs captivating photos from the HiRise camera with elegantly spared text. Still full of fun facts, young readers following NASA's Mars exploration are sure to enjoy learning about the windswept surface, many craters, and seasonal weather. We are also happy to have Ari Espinoza with us. He is the media contact, outreach lead, and content producer for HiRise at the University of Arizona. He's also the coordinator for the Beautiful Mars Project, which shares information about Mars in many languages around the world. And now I'm excited to turn it over to Suzanne and Ari. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for inviting us to Politics and Prose. And I'm so grateful to Ari for joining this program as well. So we have created a little PowerPoint to share some things about the creation of Mars Is and a little bit more about the HiRise project. So can you see this now? All right. So Ari and I first met each other 3 years ago when I reached out to him as I was beginning the Mars Is book project. And as Michelle mentioned, I'm an author from Chicago, and Ari is at the University of Arizona working in the Lunar and Planetary Lab at the HiRise project. And this is the first time we've actually seen each other, although we've been working together for 3 years via email, and he has been very kind to answer endless questions. So I'm so grateful to him. So a little of the reason why I'm interested in space, as Michelle mentioned, I'm a mechanical engineer. And I worked at McDonnell Douglas in California, where I worked on Titan and Delta rockets. And they are unmanned vehicles which carried payloads like communications and weather satellites and scientific probes. I also worked on the Delta Star spacecraft, which orbited Earth. It was a military spacecraft that collected information and data. Then I went on into the automotive field on these beautiful brake boosters, which I worked on Ford and Chrysler boosters. They help your car stop. But I think perhaps my next role was my most challenging, and that was when I became a mom, a domestic engineer, and I found one of my most enjoyable jobs was book reader. And I read to my 2 children. Here you see them, and these were some of their favorite books. And it was at this stage where I remembered how much I had loved children's books when I was young. I was always a huge reader. I was not a great writer, little known secret. Writing was my least favorite subject. Math and science were always my favorite subjects. So the thought of trying to write children's books, while it was exciting, it was also, I knew, going to be a daunting task for me. So I took a class at night at a local college on writing books for children. I joined critique groups. I went to conferences. I had a lot to learn. And so as I began submitting my stories, the publishers were so kind. They sent me all these beautiful rejection letters. I got big, small, and all different kinds for 8 straight years. I was still learning and learning how to craft a children's book. And so finally, I did get published, and now many of my books are on space. I have Countdown, 2,979 Days to the Moon, which shares the early Apollo missions 1 through 10 leading up to the Apollo 11 moon landing. And Daring Dozen, because only 12 people in all time have been on the moon. And this picture book shares the interesting stories of what each different mission did and the astronauts did while they were on the moon. And I have a computer called Catherine, about Katherine Johnson, a brilliant mathematician who helped plot the trajectories that the rockets would fly for many missions. And Astronaut Annie, my only fiction book so far about a girl who dreamed of becoming an astronaut. And a few years ago, Politics and Prose invited me to come out to their gorgeous Washington, D.C. store. And here you see me with their lovely staff, and we did an event for Countdown. And during that event, I shared, of course, authors do a lot of research. That's how I spend the bulk of my time, which is fascinating. And while writing Countdown, I had the opportunity to interview Alan Bean, the 4th man on the moon. And he shared lots of fascinating stories about what it felt like to be in space, to walk on the moon. And he told me a little secret. I've never read it anywhere, but he said that he had this one regret, that he wished he had smuggled a football when he went to the moon, so that he could have thrown the longest pass in the universe. So that was kind of fun. And another fun space adventure for one of my books was when astronaut Annie was sent to the space station, and it was read by Anne McClain, astronaut Anne McClain, for a program called Storytime from Space. Which brings me, of course, to my newest project, Mars Is, which shares the phenomenal photos taken by HiRise. And Ari has been such a valuable contact and help as he shared his expertise. And now he's going to share a little bit about what they do at HiRise.
Suzanne, thank you so much. That was a very, very nice introduction. I've got to get some of those other books, by the way. So yes, my name is Ari, and I work for HiRise, the High Resolution Imaging Science Experiment. We are based out of the University of Arizona here in Tucson, Arizona. Let's go to the next slide. We are the most powerful camera that has ever been sent to another planet. We are one of a few instruments on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. We launched in 2005, got to Mars in 2006, and we've been taking these incredible images ever since then. Now, when we got to Mars, we had to settle into our orbit, so we had to do what's called an aerobraking maneuver, and this animation will show you a little bit what that looks like. That took several months, actually. So our final orbit, it's a polar orbit. We orbit Mars about 13 times a day, actually. We've been 15 years in orbit with over 69,000 images, and we have 3 landed missions that we've imaged during descent. That's the most exciting thing, I think, ever. So go to the next slide. This is the Phoenix lander in 2008. That is the parachute attached to the lander itself as it's passing in front of Heimdall crater. It was the first time one machine has photographed another machine. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. Then in 2012, we did it again with the Curiosity rover, which is in Gale crater. You can see the detail of that beautiful image, the band around the parachute. It's awesome. And then, of course, one more time, we did Perseverance, which just landed in Jezero crater. Again, you can see the parachute attached to the rover itself on its descent. It was amazing. These are such hard images to try to do, and we managed to do it. This is a picture of Victoria crater, which is one of our first images that we took when the mission started. This is the kind of detail that I want to show you real quick, because this is when Opportunity, the rover, was around Victoria crater, and those lines that you see there are actually the tracks of the rover itself. It later went into the crater. It spent about a year there, but before it went in, we got another picture of the rover itself. Actually, on the edge, it's that bluish dot that you see in that orange circle. That's how powerful that our camera is. There's no other camera like it on any active NASA mission. And there are plenty of good cameras, but this one is the top. And this is a recent image that we've taken. It was our first false color image, actually, of Perseverance on the ground. We'll be certainly tracking that as the months unfold and as its mission starts to unfold. So Mars is about 1/2 the size of Earth, but it has all the visible landmass. If you take all the visible landmass on Earth, it will fit actually on Mars. Lots of people don't know that. The structure of Mars, we don't really know what the core is like. We're hoping that the InSight mission could give us a little bit more insight, if you will, but that mission ran into some problems, and that sometimes happens in that type of, with space sciences. The atmosphere of Mars. Mars does have an atmosphere. It's very thin. It's mostly 96% carbon dioxide. What I like to tell people is from your feet to your knees, you're going to freeze. From your knees to your chest, you're going to burn up. And from your shoulders on up, you're going to freeze again. That's why it's super important that we find good landing places for Mars for future explorations, which is what the HiRise camera is uniquely qualified to do, so that we can find safe places, but scientifically compelling places, and we can tell other eventual human crewed missions where we should probably go. And I've been doing this for about 15 years. It's a dream job. I never realized I would stumble into a dream job. And then when I met Suzanne, she came out with this wonderful book, and it's just awesome. It's perfect. It really does show you what we see and what we've learned about Mars. And it's not just for kids. So adults, please order as many copies. I know I've actually put an order in myself as well. We were more than happy to work with Suzanne to bring Mars and HiRise specifically to a whole generation of folks who may not really know about this, who might have heard of Mars and were mildly interested. The pictures that you're seeing, they really are extraterrestrial landscapes in a detail that when I was young, we could never see. Now we can. And Suzanne, thank you again, because it's an awesome book.
Oh. Well, thanks, Ari. You know, I have to say, when we were working, I was always concerned, would he think the book looked good? Would you be happy with the book? So, and we both just got our first copies this last week. So I'm so thrilled that you are happy with the product, this project that we've worked on for 3 years. So I'm often asked, you know, where do you get book ideas? Where did I get the book idea for Mars Is? And it was not, as many think, it was not a field trip that I took to Mars one day. That's not what gave me the idea. And actually, if you like this picture, NASA has a Mars photo booth. If you Google NASA Mars photo booth, you can take your own photo of yourself on Mars. So the book idea actually came when I was at a local bookstore here in Chicago, because local bookstores like Politics and Prose and this one are magical, wonderful places. And so when I was at my local 57th Street Books in Chicago, I was doing a book event. Here's a shot of, they just have wonderful books everywhere. I kept noticing this book in the back of the room. And when I was done presenting, I went and pulled it off the shelf, and it was this Mars book, Mars, The Pristine Beauty of the Red Planet. And it's a huge, thick, beautiful book, 452 pages, 17 chapters. The photographs were just unlike anything I'd ever seen of Mars. And so I noticed they were public domain, which means they could be used in another book. So I jotted down the word HiRise. I had never heard of the project and took that home. And you'll notice here are some of the photos that I saw in that book that really captured my attention. Now, I didn't end up including any of those in Mars Is, but as you can see, this really caught my eye. And so I went home with my scribbled note, HiRise, and I started researching the HiRise camera. And here up in the upper left, you see a photo of the camera early when it was being constructed, I think maybe tested. And then down in the lower right is after they've added this black sunshade, which will protect against stray sunlight. And so I started learning about the camera. And as Ari mentioned how it was then placed on a spacecraft called MRO, which is the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. It has lots of other, well, several other pieces of important equipment that are studying Mars, but you can see the arrow is pointing to the portion of HiRise camera that would be pointing down at Mars. And so after that MRO was put together, it was loaded onto this Atlas rocket, and they launched from Cape Canaveral back in 2005. And 7 months later, it was a 7-month trip to get to Mars. So in March of 2006, HiRise began sending incredible photos of Mars back to Earth. And during my research, I learned that those photos are transmitted roughly 140 million miles. Of course, it depends on the positioning of Earth and Mars at the time, which takes about 15 minutes for them to even send the photos. And I know there's a lot of processing that happens after that. So as I was considering these photos, there were 3 things that really stuck out to me that I wanted to share in the book. And one is that these photos are just beautiful. They are gorgeous to look at. They are color enhanced, which means they include color information that human eyes couldn't see, but that allows scientists to uncover or find details about Mars that they couldn't ordinarily detect. And here we have a photo that is included in Mars's, which shows some of the snow and dry ice on Mars. The other thing that these photos are helpful for scientists is it tells them a little bit about some of the recent events. And by recent, it may not mean in the last week or month, but in Mars time, in the last several decades or centuries, it can inform scientists about what is happening on Mars. And here's a beautiful photo of a fresh crater, meaning it's a relatively young crater, and they could tell that, I think, by the sharp edges and the large rayed section around it. The other thing that these photos have been extremely helpful for is they tell us about Mars history. For example, these alluvial fans, which are deposits on this surface, it was caused by water. It's proof that water once flowed on Mars. So HiRise photos share so much with people. And so as I considered the research that I had done, how the camera got to Mars and the photos that it took, I thought, how can I take all of this very compelling, interesting information and put it into a children's book that had a flow and was organized? And so as authors do, I started scribbling down different notes of, as I tried to sort out how this book would lay out. And so one of the things I thought about were the features. What are the main features of Mars that I want to share? So I had to consider the different topics: sand dunes, volcanoes, craters. I had to look at the organization. How could I organize this information in a fashion that made sense to young readers and older readers? I looked for descriptive words, short phrases that I could use to describe what the reader was seeing, such as buried bedrock, bubbling gas, mighty mesas. I started just scribbling those down, looking at different title ideas. I know one of them I can see up there was The Colors of Mars, or More Than Red. Finally came up with The Mars Is, which really, the title really helped drive the story. And I also considered the colors of the photos, because as you move from spread to spread, I wanted the reader to see a nice variety of these beautiful, colorful photos. So here you can see how I ended up with a short, brief text with just a few descriptive words, so that would really allow these gorgeous photos to take center stage in the book. And here's a portion of the book. So we have Mars Is buried bedrock, bubbling gas, and mighty mesas. Mars is slippery snow and ice, sandy windswept dunes, and craters carved by meteor crashes. This was always one of my favorite photos. I mean, to see that crater and the walls, it's just beautiful. Of course, I wanted to share more information than these short prose. So what we were able to do is we included sidebars on each spread, and you can see the white text there on the canyon spread. So then I could share a few interesting details about each photo. And back matter pages, which are the pages in the back of the book, and they're my most favorite because that's where I can really get a lot of information in. And there I was able to add a spread about the camera and just some more interesting facts about Mars. And then near the end of the book, I love that we did a collage of many photos. So you can see the textures and features all together as it shares that Mars is more amazing than anyone ever imagined. So if you would like to see additional photos besides the ones shared in this book, you can go to the HiRise catalog and sit there. You can study all 69,000 of them. And there's the official URL, but if you just Google HiRise catalog, that will come up for you. So I just want to thank Politics and Prose for inviting us to share this book. And I also want to thank HiRise because along with Ari, several other experts there answered questions and helped out with the project. I wanted to thank Dr. Matthew Chojnacki, Dr. Shane Byrne, and Dr. Candace Hansen. They were all just so generous with their time to help out with the project. So now we thought we'd see if anyone has any questions. Ari and I would be happy to answer your questions about Mars, writing, HiRise, or anything else you might care to ask.
All right, that was wonderful. Mars certainly is amazing, and that was really lovely to hear from both of you and walking us through the process. So as Suzanne said, guys, it's time for audience questions. So don't worry if you haven't entered one already, it's not too late. You can still click on Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and you can even vote on your favorite questions, which will move them to the top of the list. So we're gonna go through as many as possible before our time ends today. So we'll go ahead and start with a question from Mike Slade. Mike says, it amazes me that HiRise has already been in Mars orbit for 15 years. How long do you believe it could conceivably stay in orbit? And what kind of tests did you run on HiRise before, while you were building it on Earth to ensure it would be so robust? So I don't know.
That sounds like it's for me, right?
Yeah, you can speak to it, Ari, whoever wants to support.
All right, so we're actually hoping that the camera and the orbiter itself can last for another 10 years. We know we have enough power to do that. The batteries are still in very good shape, and I certainly hope it lasts another 10 years because I would like to retire from this job if it were possible. You can only sometimes test certain things so much when it's here on Earth, whether it's a spacecraft, instruments on a spacecraft, or a rover. Now, like with rovers, for example, like Opportunity and Spirit, their mission life was only for 90 days, but both of those rovers lasted several years. And even for a camera like HiRise, it has a mission life, but the most we can hope is that we can get extended missions over and over. So its primary science phase, we know, is usually about a year or 2 years. And if everything is still in good working order, we can continue getting extended missions and hoping to just keep doing that as long as the project feels that there's value that can come from it. So there's electronics, they break down all the time, but we try our best when we're manufacturing them and we're testing them for them to last a long time, but understanding that the original mission may only be 90 days or a couple years, for example.
Good to know, thank you. All right, Suzanne, we have a question from Elise. What was the most surprising thing you learned about Mars going through these photos and doing the research for this book?
Well, I think the most surprising thing, I didn't realize that there was snow and ice, and the bulk, they're the poles, and the bulk of that is frozen carbon dioxide. But also occasionally, and Ari, you can chime in and see if I'm correct on this, when there has been meteor impact and new exposed surface, they have found ice made of water that has been trapped under there, which I found that unbelievable. So, and HiRise will capture the photo of that water ice. It won't last very long, but they have captured photos of water. I did not know that.
That's super interesting. That kind of leads us into our next question. Ari, you might be able to speak to this. Could you talk a little more about the color enhancement and how that works with HiRise's photographs?
Sure. So a typical high-rise image is about 5 kilometers across, 10 to 13 kilometers in length. But we can do the center portion of that, which is about 1 kilometer, in 2 different types of color: infrared, red-green, and red-green and blue. So we can use information from those to tease out details that you can't really see in black and white. So, for example, most of the images that you see in Mars for example, they're only about 1 kilometer across, but take a look at the detail. It's incredible. You could use a program like Photoshop or even our own free viewer, which is called HiView, and do a default contrast stretch. Then you begin to see a lot of these vibrant colors. Now, Mars basically is red. So when you see things like blue, that indicates volcanic material or basalt. And so that kind of information is very useful because we pair it up with information we get from a spectrometer, also on MRO, called CRISM. So it tells us there's probably some type of mineral here. This mineral is usually one color or the other. We take that default stretch and we can see it in much, much better detail. So that's what really, really helps. And that's the reason why we're able to do that. Now, if we could do the whole picture in color, oh, that would be fantastic. That would be fantastic.
Wow. No, it's super interesting to learn more. Charlene asks, she says, love seeing your notes in developing this book, Suzanne. So that was neat to see how you pieced it together and your process. But she wants to know, do you keep a writer's notebook?
Well, what I keep is a folder on each project. And actually so here's my Mars folder. They all just have their own. And those are the notes, these are some of the notes you saw. So I'm kind of old school. I have a paper, although on the document itself, I kept a sources list and where exactly I found each fact in the book. And that's a computer document.
Very nice. We've got another scientific question. Let's see, Ari. Matthew Stevens, actually, this is from Kai and Maya, excuse me. They are curious, how did Mars lose its water? Do we know anything more about that?
So that's a very, very good question because we're still actually trying to figure that out. So Mars was likely very much a watery world in the ancient past. We're pretty sure about that. But over time, somehow, some way, it began to lose its magnetic field, or at least began to weaken quite a bit. So that meant that more of the sun's rays could get to the surface and begin to essentially boil off anything that was there. Now, how long it take? We're still not sure. There's another mission called MAVEN, which studies the atmosphere, and it's been looking at that question a lot. But this likely happened over a long period of time. But it also happened a long time ago. So Mars has been more a desert planet longer than it ever had oceans or seas. And we still don't know how deep those oceans and seas might have been.
Super interesting. Yeah, one of my favorites was kind of seeing like the ridges and whatnot in the book, like you mentioned, Suzanne, with all of those, the fans and whatnot. Very, very interesting. Heidi has a question. Any insight into whether humans will land on Mars in the next 50 to 75 years?
I get asked that question a lot, and I always want to be positive and optimistic and say, we can do anything, that type of thing. But most people will ask me, do you think in like in our lifetime, a human being will land on Mars? And I often say, probably not. And the reason for that is because no one is going to send anybody to Mars if they know they can't bring them home safely. It's just not going to happen. Now, 50 to 70 years, that's a long time, which means you could develop better technology to protect lives of the crew and better equipment also that could get them there maybe a little quicker. So short answer is, I hope so. I really, really do. Long term, I don't really know, to be honest.
No, we appreciate your honesty for sure. Well, we'll just have to see. Now, Suzanne, I'm curious, in terms of just writing nonfiction, you've got a lot of lovely books out there. What is like the best part about writing something that's nonfiction, or the most challenging in terms
Well, those two different questions.
Yeah, totally different.
I would say the most challenging for me is whenever I research a book, just like Mars is, I always kind of give a visual, like I feel like I learned this much about this subject and I need to know this much, but really what I can include in a children's picture book is about this much. So the challenge for me is to take all of this fascinating, interesting, and I have to decide which facts, which events work best for this book, and is there like a thread that I can tie that information together so that that isn't a compelling, engaging story. And then maybe some of this other I can include in the back matter, but that's always hard for me to get that, once I've learned, is to get that first draft down. Sure. That's where I've made those decisions. And once I have the first draft, I really enjoy that moving forward, because then it's an editing, it's a polishing, working with experts to maybe vet the manuscript. But for me, the challenge is going from here to here.
No, it's well put. And then is there anything, more, I don't know, that you enjoy about, nonfiction as opposed to fiction, or?
Well, I just find things that are true, events, people, planet, I just find that more interesting personally. And I think a lot of people do. I know when my children were young, I had two different kind of readers. And my daughter, who was more of a reluctant reader, she loved nonfiction. She would grab those books with the photos like Mars is, maybe it would be animals or whatever. And she was so fascinated, she wanted to read it, the captions, the text. So I know how kids are curious and adults are curious. And so I think things that are true are the most interesting of all.
Yeah, no, completely. Is that, I'm with your kids and everything, is there anything that draws you to writing for kids more so, like in specifically more of the younger age range or middle grade, or?
I think it's just my own personal love of children's books from when I was young, and picture books are just such a beautiful, compact format. I just love the genre. I have, now Countdown is a middle grade. So I have written a middle grade because there was too much I needed to tell in a book about all of the Apollo missions leading up, it's in verse, but in general, picture books are kind of my first love. So the illustrations, the photos are just a beautiful book.
Well, that's wonderful. Kind of becoming a dream job of sorts. And Ari, you talked about working with HiRise as a dream job. Do you also, I think, work with Beautiful Mars Project? Would you be able to share a little bit about that and some goals or some resources, what that means? I apologize for the sun over here, guys, as you see me messing with this the whole time. I should have known better with sunset. But Ari, if you want to talk about Beautiful Mars Project.
Yes, thank you so much. So the Beautiful Mars Project we have a very simple philosophy at HiRise, and we call it the people's camera because we believe that it belongs to everybody. This is one of the reasons why we turn around our data faster than any other active mission at this point to the planetary data system. So I decided, what's another way that we can reach people who may not speak English very well or even speak English at all? So conceived of this volunteer project where people will help translate our titles and sometimes our captioned images into multiple languages. It's succeeded more than I could ever possibly have imagined because you have some of the obvious ones, Spanish, French, or German, but we have volunteers who help us translate our titles into languages you probably wouldn't even think would be involved, like Icelandic, Romanian, for example. We have Hebrew, we have Arabic, and Portuguese. And yes, we have it in Welsh and some Celtic languages, as well as Latin. And that just showed me that people really do like space. People really do like Mars. And if this was their way of contributing, then it was a good thing to do. And it was something I wanted to pursue. So we have more feeds in different languages than any active NASA mission, period. It's something we're very proud of, and we're always looking for volunteers, which you can find on our website, uahirise.org.
That's amazing. All right. Going back to our audience folks. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Kai and Mia, not Maya, sorry about that, Mia, has another question. Were there ever any life forms on Mars? Do we know that yet?
So we don't know that yet, but that's exactly one of the science goals of the Perseverance mission actually right now, is we want to look in these areas that we believe might have had some type of water in the past. So everything is in the ground. You got to dig for it, basically. So if there might have been any kind of microbial life, or maybe something a little more than that, we're likely to find it in layers of rock. So we want to dig and bring samples back and test them. We don't know for a fact. We're hoping that we can do that. And as our tools get better, we're hoping that we can get even better answers to that.
Oh, very cool. Suzanne, this is from Elise. How did you go about choosing which of the 69,000 photos to include in the book? How'd you narrow it down?
Yeah, that did get interesting. Well, Ari clued me in pretty early on. I think there was a best of HiRise or it was best of MRO, but there was a section where the program had already kind of separated out what they thought were some of the best photos. But that was actually a really fun part of it, because I would just, ooh, that's a good one. Ooh, that's good. And then I would, I kind of had my folder, but then as I mentioned, I wanted to share lots of different geographic features. So I wasn't going to have 10 photos of the dunes. I wanted the dunes, a volcano, crater, alluvial. So I was trying to get a variety too. So it was kind of, what are the most interesting, compelling photos? And then of those, which ones highlighted different features on Mars?
Sure. Ari, is HiRise launch cameras to other planets as well? Charlene wants to know, or do you have hopes for going elsewhere?
I would certainly hope that there would be a HiRise 2 that we would put around Mars. And what we would do is we would take everything that we learned from this mission, the electronics and how we did everything, and correct our mistakes and change our assumptions. And so that we could have full color with the same resolution, maybe even better, but in full color. But right now, that's just in the maybe type of, we filed it under possibly, actually. As far as sending to other planets, well, we think that there should be a HiRise type camera on all future missions as well. But those things, it totally depends on the mission. It totally depends on the cost. So right now, there's only one HiRise, and we're pretty happy with it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Are there photos that stand out to you, Ari, or Suzanne? You've mentioned some with the crater that stood out to you. Do you have some favorites from the book, or when you're sifting through?
I hope I didn't jump in, Suzanne, before you answered. I'm sorry about that.
Go ahead, because I want to look for something. Go ahead, Ari. I want to share something.
I have a lot of images that I really, really like. I don't know if I have any particular favorites, but Arabia Terra, I really like that more than probably any other region, because there's so many different mounds with layers. They're just really beautiful to look at, especially in enhanced color. But the thing that I like about the most is that I can almost, with all of these thousands of images, I can almost spot what is a HiRise image when I see them. Oh yeah, that's one of ours, when I see it in the media or anywhere else. So I think I've gotten pretty good at it.
And what I was going to comment on was, there's one here of the dunes, but what I found fascinating, and the sidebar shares this, is that HiRise has studied a particular dune over time, the same location, and photographed it over time. And then they've been able to calculate how fast the dunes are traveling on Mars' surface. And here we share that they travel over 3 feet, which is about a meter in a Martian year, which is 687 Earth days. So it's fascinating to me how they are watching. I've seen avalanches and other movements, things happening on Mars, by photographing the same area over a period of time.
That is fascinating. That kind of leads us into our next question from Mike, talking about water content decreasing over time. Is it reasonable to assume that Mars is trending towards being less inhabitable for life?
I would certainly say yes. I mean, Mars is, on one level, you can say that it is a dead planet. Nothing can grow there because it will be completely sterilized on the surface. and water cannot be in a stable form on the surface.
Mm.
Our real question is what's underneath? And a few minutes ago, I said everything is in the ground. That's true. Everything is in the ground. So if we want to build a habitat there, we're going to have to figure out how to get underground and use resources from there, like, for example, any potential water resources. But right now, as it stands, nothing can grow on the surface whatsoever.
Okay. Well, talking about what's next for then you two as individuals, maybe not Mars in life, but let's see, Suzanne, do you have any new projects in the works or anything that's coming up for you? And then after Suzanne, maybe Ari, are you continuing on with HiRise and Mars beautiful project? But I'll let Suzanne go first.
Yeah, I've got, I think about 6 books in the works that are under contract. And the next one is You in the Universe. And it's a bedtime story about a little girl who, as she goes to sleep, it talks about how the earth is spinning and how her planets are rotating around the sun. And it kind of gives a picture of solar systems, galaxies, the universe as a whole, while this girl is sleeping, and also incorporates her dreams of what she might want to do in the future. So another space theme. And I've got another one in the pipeline about Vera Rubin, who discovered evidence for dark matter, and Mary Morgan, who was a woman who developed a fuel that helped get America into space, put our first satellite, Explorer 1, into space. So of my next 6, 3 of them are space titles. So we've got a lot more space to come.
That's neat. And Ari, what's next for you? Are you continuing with HiRise?
I'm going to continue with HiRise until they tell me to leave and never come back.
No, that's wonderful. Let's see. We have time for maybe, 1 or 2 more questions. Do either of you have a favorite planet? Just throwing that out for grins. Is it Mars, or is there another planet?
I'm going to have to say Earth. I'm pretty partial to Earth. We do have a beautiful planet here, and especially I think you might not appreciate the beauty and the complexity of Earth until you look at these other planets. We've been sitting here talking about Mars, this dry, desolate planet where you can't grow anything, and you consider our beautiful blue atmosphere around Earth, and just how all of our ecosystems work together. So hands down, Earth.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. I mean, I think people look at Mars both because it's so Earth-like, but also because it is very un-Earth-like of what might be in the future. What if there was nothing there? And so you compare and contrast, and Earth is a beautiful place.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see, Donna asks, Ari, what were you interested in as a kid that led you towards your career?
I always did like science fiction when I was younger, but the way that I came about this job, I did not study science in school. That's not what my degrees are in. I came about it in a very roundabout way. And sometimes I think that can be the best thing for a person, because I've learned so much about Mars and about geology in particular that I am able to go out and talk to people and answer with some kind of authority, like I know what I'm talking about. So I think it was an opportunity for me I hate to be cliche, but it really was a learning experience. The things that really interested me that I didn't have any idea when I was a kid at all.
Very neat. No, thanks for sharing. And Suzanne, just to kind of wrap things up, either for Mars or you've mentioned some of these other books coming out with, STEM focuses. What message do you hope readers will kind of take away with your various projects, or this one in particular?
Well, I think all of my projects, I hope, inspire readers in some way, either inspire them to pursue their passion, because a lot of my biographies that I've written, and Daring Dozen and Countdown, talk about real people who faced big challenges and obstacles when they were trying to achieve their goal, yet they persisted, they worked around it, they picked themselves up. The first Apollo 1 mission, the 3 astronauts died on the ground in the capsule. They burned up 2 weeks before they were to launch. But that did not dissuade the mission. And so I hope it inspires children to go after their goals, or inspires them to learn more about something. For instance, in Mars Is, this gives them a look at Mars like they've never seen it before. And I think it'll make them curious and want to learn more. So I just really like to inspire readers one way or another.
Well, it's an awesome book. It's an awesome book. I'm inspired and I work here. You know?
No, beautifully said. Thank you both. Thank you, viewers, for your questions. And thank you again, Suzanne and Ari, for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. It's a great book. Want to remind viewers that you can still get your copy. We have the link in the chat box, so be sure to check that out. Coming with signed book plates while supplies last. As an independent bookstore, please know we appreciate your support. Want to let you know to check out our website for updated event listings, and you can follow our children and teen department on social media under @Kids and Prose. And that about wraps up our time tonight. So we hope you enjoyed learning about Mars. And again, thank you for joining us, and we wish you all the best.